Welcome, everybody. Here we are again at the Anxiety Coaches podcast. And today I have a very special guest for you. I am so thrilled to actually be meeting with and know of Dr. Drew Ramsey. So I want to share a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into a conversation because we have a lot to talk to you about. Dr. Drew Ramsey is a board certified integrative psychiatrist. He's a best selling author and a leading voice in nutritional psychiatry and mental fitness. He served for 20 years as an assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at Columbia University's Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons and is the founder of the Brain Food Clinic in New York City and also the Spruce Mental Health in Jackson, Wyoming. A sought after speaker and educator, his work has been featured widely in the media, and he has a new book. It's titled Healing the Modern Brain: 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind. And the book will be available as you are hearing this show. Dr. Ramsey argues that we've become over reliant on pharmaceuticals for treating mental health issues and underestimate the power of nutrition and lifestyle choices to build our mental fitness. It's a radical and personal form of self care that involves adopting a series of small lifestyle changes to enhance mental health and well being. So now you know why I'm so excited to have him with us. And I want to dive into a powerful connection between food and mental health. Welcome, Dr. Ramsey.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Gina. Hey, everybody, it's really a treat to be with you all. I'm so excited to spend some time talking about mental fitness and nutritional psychiatry and answering your questions.
Awesome. You know, Drew, often I share with my listeners and my clients that our greatest challenges can also be our most powerful teachers guiding us forward in life. And so I always ask guests if they could share a time, perhaps when you, Drew, faced your own struggles with health or wellness, and how you navigated that journey toward healing and landed in your own career on nutritional psychiatry. I'd love to hear.
Well, sure. Thank you for asking. I think like a lot of people interested in mental health, I've had a variety of challenging times in my life. As you were talking, I was thinking, I think I'm still on the journey. I mean, I'm in the middle of a book launch and celebrating this book coming out, but and have a wonderful practice and wonderful family, and there are still a lot of mental health challenges on my radar, as it were, like a
Mm,
lot of people my age, whether it's trying to address those anxieties and worries you have about your kids and, how this world today, being a parent, trying to understand what they're facing, or taking care of our parents. When I think about specific times, I think a lot of them are when I was younger and I was a little less oriented. Maybe it's the times like when I was in college and I was on a low-fat vegetarian diet and falling asleep in class every afternoon and kind of foggy in my head. Or, there's certainly been some times early when I moved to New York to train at Columbia as a psychiatrist, where
mm,
I was in something of a new culture, being from very rural Indiana, and suddenly being in Manhattan, being at really one of the top places in psychiatry. It was a
mm,
big transition for me, and so a lot of this book comes from my story in terms of some of the struggles and challenges I've had, but also really tries to focus on some of my patients and the lessons that, really over the years I learned from them that have helped me get through. And some of them are lessons that we've all had, that we know, like when we move our bodies, we feel better and we sleep better, or when we eat more nutrient-dense food and feel more control over our food and food choices, we feel more secure and our mood is a little better. Uh, and so I wanted to, share both some stories where there are transitions, like I talk about in the book, or I share in the book. We are really, our family is very blessed now to be settled in a pretty, I wouldn't say rural Wyoming, but pretty isolated Wyoming. We're in Jackson, so a town of about 10, 15,000 people. Uh, after about 20 years in New York, we moved back to my parents' farm. And so going from, this really stimulating, exciting urban setting that I had adapted to as best I
Mhm.
could, but I'm a farm boy at heart. And then getting back to my parents' farm and then moving to a new community, which is just, it's hard to describe Jackson. Uh, it's just a very special place in terms of mental health. It's a place like a lot of intermountain town regions that has a bunch of mental health challenges. What I
Mhm.
find really interesting here is they're very explicit about it. I've never lived in a small community. They've done two community-wide surveys, kind of looking at the mental health. There are 7 or 8 large mental health nonprofits. I mean, it's just really, there's a lot of clinicians, by some counts, probably more mental health clinicians here than anywhere in the world. And so, when I think about like times in my life, as you can hear, I go through several different phases, and I would say in each of those, the challenges are maybe different. Some very adult challenges, like being a mid-career professional and a
Mhm.
parent, which I bet a lot of you listening know, it's just like, okay, you hope you feel me there. And then I think probably some explicit times, it's different today in the media, Gina, and everybody
Yeah.
listening, where people, physicians, influencers talk really explicitly about their mental health, their depressive episodes. And I think that's really wonderful. I'm kind of a generation of psychiatrists, and maybe in some ways like stigmatizing, where I
Mm.
almost think about it as I don't share a ton about that. A little bit about some depression. I share with people I stopped drinking 3.5, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But the kind of nitty gritty details, what I've done, who I've seen, what I've taken. I probably share a little bit less than sometimes I feel like I should. I think what you're alluding to in a lot of ways. Is I hope to be one of the people in the space who I'm an active psychopharmaceutical prescriber. And so
Mhm.
when I say, hey, I think we've become overly reliant on it, as you put, what I mean by that is that I think medications are very effective for sets of
Mm.
symptoms, for certain individuals, for certain genotypes, meaning certain people just do a lot better on some different types of medications. But when we think that's all there is to our mental health,
Mm.
I think we're doing a disservice both to ourselves and to kind of modern mental health and psychopharmacology because it speaks to a kind of a silver bullet solution idea
Yeah.
to the complexity of our mental health. And that's really, where this idea of mental fitness in some ways comes in.
Mhm.
As you think about, like, just think about a clinical scenario, I share several in the book, but someone comes to see me for clinical depression and they're
Mm.
eating poorly and they're not moving their body and they're not really connected or having relationships. They don't feel engaged in work.
Mm.
Certainly treating a depression or anxiety will help with some of those things, but without like some specific framework, effort, commitment to building out more of these aspects of mental fitness, I don't think we're doing all that we need to do for our mental health. And
Mm.
part of where this book really came about now was just my impression, and I hope a lot of you listening agree that we're just up against more. And
Yeah.
so we need to bring more to the fight for our mental health. And that's what I think mental fitness is. It's, saying that every week, I don't want you to just think, did you do the exercise? Did you eat the vegetables? I mean,
Mhm.
those are great, but I wanted us all to be thinking, well, what's the most important aspect of my mental health I focused on this week? And when I did that, I found it was a little too broad. I needed to focus in. And so I thought, where are the things that kind of always work? Like if I could wave my psychiatric magic wand and like
Mhm.
deliver this to my patient's life, that it just, it's going to work. Like a new loving relationship is a good example. Boy, even if you're treating
Yeah.
someone with really severe depression, if they have a little love walk into their life, oh, that's a big smile. Like just
Yeah.
mood boost, mood lifts, things, the world looks different that next day. And as I thought, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. There's just some things that seem to light us up, things that we
Yeah.
tend to push for or need in our lives. And I thought, why don't we be explicit? Mental health has gotten more complicated. I think a lot of people are in the weeds arguing about that as opposed to doing something today about your mental fitness. And I hope the
Yeah.
book helps people see that kind of as I have, that for all of my concerns, complaints, worries, etc., usually when I'm doing the best is when I'm taking good care of these tenets of mental fitness.
Yes, and that's the word that I love that you have kind of coined in my mind, the mental fitness. Because when we think about getting fit physically, we think about it's a very proactive process. We don't just ask someone to give us a magic pill or wave a magic wand. We know if I'm going to get fit, this is going to take effort. I'm committed. There's things I have to do. And I actually would hope that we could look at our whole health like that, but start with mental health is fine with me. Um, if we could look at getting mentally fit, because health is, seems to have, I don't know, the word has been overused or something, because it's um, often from outside of ourselves, versus fitness really has to come from within. Would you agree with that? Is that the point you're trying to make with
Yeah,
this
I have,
wonderful
yes.
book?
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing the book and being excited about it, Gina. It means a lot, especially as someone in the field. And I think that's exactly right. I'm all for people taking medications, getting consults, doing therapy. I've done a ton of therapy.
Mhm.
Love all that stuff. It
Yeah.
just when we think about, okay, it's Tuesday morning, it's 7 a.m., you've got a little bit of time.
Mm.
I know that when I end up doom scrolling, as opposed to a little bit of my mental fitness routine,
Mm.
uh, it just the day doesn't go as well. My days are still good for the most part, but it's just not as good when
Yeah.
I lose sense of a sense of engagement with something. I just feel like I'm going through the motions. Oh, really hard. Well, how do we keep that? What I call the tenet of engagement. How do you keep that
Mm.
engagement up? And
Mm.
like anything, if we're not paying attention to it in our lives, especially today, my experience is the modern world kind of creeps in.
Yeah.
If I'm not careful, I'm worried about a lot of usually traumatic things going on far away from me. I'm maybe worried about the political situation. I'm reading news or I'm scrolling or I'm digesting whatever the algorithm of the social media platform I am is serving up to me. Just
Right.
it's not an engaged existence. It's not helping me achieve my goals.
Right.
And so that's really you're quite right. I'm kind of asking us all, hey, like the mental health epidemic keeps getting worse,
Mm.
and let's
Yeah.
stop looking around and externalizing and kind of hoping for a solution. I don't mean that there are not going to be new treatments or new medicines or new breakthroughs or new research. Sure there
Right.
will be, but that in front of all of us, as I learned with my nutritional psychiatry, in front of all of us are a set of choices
Mm.
and I don't think we're framing them that way. And if you frame it that there are a set of choices, and there are a set of choices that keep your brain growing, keep it repairing itself, keep inflammation low, keep from we know of the last maybe 15 or 20 years of modern brain science, just good choices that you should be making, activities you should be engaging in to keep your brain optimally healthy. And the
Yeah.
request is like, hey, I think more of that is good for you. And I hope this book helps people really
Yeah.
kind of grab that by the horns and do more of it.
Yes, and I think people are, pardon the pun, hungry for it. I think people are looking more and more, even though I know there's a lot of reliance on pharmaceuticals, and we don't need to get into all of that at all because you have stated where you stand very nicely. But I think we've kind of been trained, even when I was working in eating disorders with all of the wonderful, wonderful women that actually taught me a lot. Um, kind of, there's like a little funnel, you get kind of funneled in when you don't know to ask the right questions, or um, to even care for your own self well enough to know, oh, I'm off because I did XYZ. We don't even have that awareness sometimes. So this is why your 9 tenets can really be helpful to people. And I
Well,
wondered
that's
if, go ahead, go right
well,
ahead.
thank you for saying that. That in some ways it's a perfect segue because it's exactly where the book starts. The first tenet of mental fitness is self-awareness.
Mm,
And it's because I really believe in self-actualization, that within all of us is a progression.
mm,
My knowledge of food, how I feed myself, how I eat, how I feed my family, it's different than 15 years ago. My family's different than 15 years ago. Same thing with my movement.
Yeah.
How I think about exercise now in my early 50s as opposed to 20 years ago, 30
Hmm.
years ago when I was a college athlete, radically different. And
Yeah.
so we progress and grow, and having the self-awareness where we are in our path, whether it's maybe struggling and feeling a little confused in our 20s,
Hmm.
or in our 30s. Boy, so much happens in the 30s. um, or in our 40s, where a lot of times, there's a mix of both, great kind of success and depth, but also a little realization of paths we didn't take. So,
Yeah.
so many stages in adult development. And so self-awareness and it's getting oriented, like where are you? And as I describe it, if life is a poker game and you're dealt a set of cards, really looking at those cards quite clearly. A lot of
Yeah.
times we, have a lot of denial and resentment and frustration about the reality of our situation. I certainly appreciate that. But self-awareness is for all of us about understanding the cards that we have been dealt to the best of our abilities. And that's the only way we can play well. And so
Yeah.
often we're trying to play well, we're trying to optimize, we're, eating more of this or doing this particular routine. And, it isn't done in a context of self-awareness of
Hmm.
whether those things necessarily fit right now in your life or whether that's actually the thing that you need. Um, uh, and so I try to use some techniques from my clinical office. I'm mostly a clinician and a psychotherapist.
Hmm.
I've had patients on the couch all day, so
Hmm.
I've still got a
Yes.
couch. It's maybe a
I
little
love it.
atypical. It's a little atypical maybe for psychiatrists. Most of us are trained to do psychotherapy. Not a lot of programs really focus on it as much as my training did,
Okay.
and it's certainly something that I found to be very effective and essential, and also kind of taught me about this, that as people kind of come and stabilize and achieve their initial treatment goals, and then they stay,
Mm.
there's a question of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like what is the process at hand? And I found for a lot of people, they were like up leveling.
Yeah.
They were kind of, they'd stopped drinking, they'd gotten their depression better treated, they were engaging more deeply in relationships, and they want to keep going.
Hmm.
And so there's a way that self-awareness is something that is always in need of some attention, I find,
Hmm.
because we're dealing with different things in different phases of our lives. I go through in the book some of the explicit ways that I've grown my self-awareness, that I see
Hmm.
patients growing self-awareness. And then in all of the book, the tenets really backed up by research. Like
Okay.
when you think about journaling, like I've gotten lots of journaling recommendations. I hope where
Yeah.
healing the modern brain kind of separates out is I don't know that you've gotten a journaling recommendation that's
Hmm.
attached to the neurobiology based on real
Hmm.
research of what happens when we engage in self-reflective processes. And
Hmm.
so when we engage in self-reflective processes like journaling, right? You're journaling about yourself, people in your life. Over time, research has shown that we increase the activity in our prefrontal cortex. It's the kind of this new modern part of our brain that's involved in executive functioning and decision making,
Hmm.
basically, like our ability to do stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's really exciting for me to think, okay, in the midst of like maybe struggling with some brain fog and doom scrolling, I'm going to spend just maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the morning with a pen and a paper and try and get good at sharing some thoughts. I have some prompts in the book. Lots of people have wonderful journaling prompts.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a big free flow journaler. I'm not a big prompter, but I
Yeah.
certainly
Me
try
too.
and I try and my sense is like, oh, I just try and write down the struggle. What's the pain
Hmm.
of the day? What do I
Yeah.
really need to like sort out? What am I scared of? But like
Yeah.
I said, I have prompts in the book.
Hmm.
And I found it to be really clarifying. Like if I don't get to journal every couple of days, ideally even daily, like I really miss it. I feel like something's missing in the pacing of my life. So again, the book's full of techniques like this because maybe journaling's not your thing.
Hmm.
My hope is to put a number of ideas out there for you, backed up by that science of, hey, whatever way you want to engage in self-awareness, let's all agree. it is very important for all of us when it comes to managing our mental health and kind of up-leveling our mental fitness. Otherwise, you don't know where. In the book, I share the story of Charlotte, who's a woman I worked with who, like a lot of us, just started drinking too much during the pandemic.
Hmm.
And one of a number of people I've gotten to work with who stopped alcohol in the last 5 years. It's really been an interesting trend to see. It inspired me so much. I stopped drinking as well. And but for Charlotte, really, it wasn't that she had a huge background with substance use
Hmm.
disorders where she had alcoholism in her family. She just kind of like, one thing led to another, and there she was, kind of putting down a bottle a day during the pandemic. And so
Yeah.
self-awareness, where she's one of these people you work with where you just kind of ask them to keep track, and by having some accountability with you once a week, maybe twice a week, and some tough weeks, like it kind of helps clean up the behavior. And that's what happened with her.
Mm.
So again, just this notion of self-awareness, for a lot of people, certainly it takes more than just that to stop something like alcohol or to tackle a mental health issue. But self-awareness is really essential for this process and essential for you and your mental health journey.
Absolutely. And I love that that's the starting point. It's a beautiful place to, in anxiety, we talk about just breaking the cycle, and there's different places you can break the cycle. And same with your mental wellness, like, or your fitness. Where
Hmm.
can you, where can you enter the process? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I hope
finding
to
that
set it up that
place.
way, right? Like
Yeah.
self-awareness is a place, but I think with
Yes.
each of them, some of the tenets I think are, people are know sleep hygiene
Right.
and movement and nutrition are important for their mental health and their brain
Mm-hmm.
health over time. Um, and so, and I hope with each of the tenets, I give some good entry points.
Mm-hmm.
If you're struggling with nutrition, I hope you're not struggling with the idea of lentils because they're inexpensive, delicious, and they're packed with folate, fiber, and protein, right? Three
Yeah.
things that most people aren't getting enough of.
Yeah.
And so I think there are some real actionable items in each of the tenets that, are low-hanging fruit, by
Yeah.
design. I mean, I'm a clinician. Like, if it doesn't work on a Wednesday night in Wyoming, like I don't really think it's that good of a mental health intervention. I just don't
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
I mean, one, that's where I am, but
Yep.
I think growing up in the Midwest and then practicing in New York, where there's a real kind of necessity of efficiency and
Mm.
pace
Yep.
and efficacy, like doing a good job quick. I don't know, the mix of those things I hope, led to me being a very practical clinician of
Mm.
appreciating, especially I think with the food books, appreciating, hey, where I'm from, my people, like our top grocery store is Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
That's normal.
and that's how it is for most of the country. And so anytime I've written a recipe or when I'm thinking about these things, I'm thinking about folks who are where maybe I'm from in Indiana. I'm thinking about the people here in my community in Wyoming
Mm-hmm.
and in this state. And of course, I'm also thinking about where I did a lot of my practice in more urban areas.
Mm.
The book certainly gets into that and kind of shares as some of my path of, being in all these different places and seeing how it's affecting my mental health, seeing what challenges come up, getting into the research of that. I mean, part of living in New York was so great and awesome, and I learned so much and so
Mm-hmm.
s- wonderful, especially to be in that kind of, it was a very special like wellness scene in New York City. Let's say
Sure.
around 2010, there's just whether it's the Mind Gut Body Green team that just
Mm-hmm.
was, I don't know, it's just like a couple of them, or some of the luminaries in wellness were just getting started. It was just a very special time to be there. So I have great affection for that. I also noticed, boy, like my sleep hygiene took a hit. I started drinking a lot more. I started eating out a lot.
Yeah.
I was also exercising, being healthy in lots of ways. But, there was a kind of, remember the first 6 months I'd moved to New York, my eyes were always like it's just so much particulate matter, and it was just my eyes were always kind of like watering or tearing
Mm.
up. Or it was just
Yeah.
really kind of an intense noise pollution experience for me, as a lot of people. And then I adjusted like we do to things. Um, but getting into some of the details and some of the science of what's actually going on in our brains.
Yeah.
We live in urban environments and in noise environments now where the effect on our mental health and our cognition, the increase in our dementia risk is really clear in the literature. Same
Mm,
thing with the artificial light situation where we're just not getting that normal chronological kind of time light-based rhythm that our
mm,
brain needs to clean out all the waste, to consolidate our memories and process our emotions. And so,
mm.
there again, a lot of things that we can do, and a lot of lessons I've learned in my experience as a person and as a psychiatrist practicing in these different settings.
Yeah, and just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do it. I mean, I
That's
I've worked with a lot of people, obviously coming to chat about anxiety. Um, that had tried to move. That was their childhood dream. They were going to do XYZ and they were going to go to New York City. And I'm originally from central New York, so I know the downstate, I know about it. I would never live there, but um, and then they find out, oh, it was like the environment was such a huge shift for them that they were very disappointed in themselves when they don't quite make it, and they
Mm.
decide to go live in a different environment for because they felt better. Now there's the self-awareness to know enough to go if you do, if it isn't your place, because it
Yeah, I
isn't
think
for everybody, right?
it isn't for everybody, and I also think that there are a lot of different factors that affect whether urban living is healthy for you or not.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people move apartments and it radically changed their mental health,
Yeah.
going from, let's say, a north-facing apartment to something where you get a sunbeam.
Mm.
Sounds kind of silly until you are living in that space, and it makes a big difference. Um, there are all kinds of things that can affect someone's like urban living experience, as you
Yeah.
note. But it's a major test, and I think it taught me a lot about mental fitness because I'd meet a lot
Mm.
of patients where they moved to New York and they're smart, they're working a really high pressure job, they're
Mhm.
going out, they're socializing, and their mental health just tanks.
Yeah.
And so understanding, well, what's going on? Well, how you connect up, like the tenet of connection, I think came out of
Mm.
my experience meeting a lot of people who were in the midst of mental health things, and one of the root causes of it was they were very isolated.
Yeah.
And if you have a genetic propensity to a major mental health disorder, let's say like our top cause of disability, depression,
Mm.
if you have a genetic propensity for depression, even if you're very well treated, if you end up in an isolated situation where you're really not getting any, kind of recreation, good times, connection, self-care, you're
Mm.
struggling, you're kind of insecure in a new space, you're more vigilant, right? This is just a kind of setup to activate that depression.
Yeah.
And so then you see when you're a clinician, you often meet people in that state and you see them kind of step by step get out of it. You pay very close attention, like, wow, like what changed? Like what
Yeah.
did you do? And so the tenets really stem from those moments for me clinically where it's like, wow, you really shifted what you eat and wow,
Hmm.
like you have a lot more energy, you're feeling better, you're sleeping better. Huh. Like that was a good change. Or as I mentioned earlier, when people connect and it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be romantic love. I really have enjoyed seeing things like good friendships. I've heard about
Mm.
some birthday dinners recently where a couple of old friends like get together and sit for hours over a pot of tea at the end. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
so lovely to hear about. I think it's probably so inspiring for me. And so seeing again what gets people better, I thinking that, hey, more of this in our life and encouraging everyone with these stories, but also with the research. Right? I don't want everyone to
Yeah.
think these are just like stories of, I don't know, my journey and patients' journeys. I also like to get into stuff like,
Hmm.
hey, you eat more seafood and omega-3 fats, you have more brain cells as you age. That's not wellness
Hmm.
hyperbole, that's just scientific fact,
Right.
shown over and over again in the research. If you work on having more friendships and connection as you age, it's the equivalent of, in some ways, not smoking. Right. If
Mm.
you just kind of let modern life deteriorate your friendships and relationships, as so many of us can do, it's kind of like picking up a smoking habit. Like it's that
Wow.
bad for your health.
Yeah.
So, taking active steps to build community, to build connection, again, I try to talk about the science through these, like new lenses is what I call them.
Mm,
We think when I trained, for example, we didn't think about neuroplasticity, this idea that your brain grows in adult life, your brain keeps repairing
right.
itself, right? If Gene and I wanted to learn Japanese starting
Hmm.
today, lo and behold, 9 months from now, you'd visit us in Tokyo, where we'd be finishing up our intensive, and we wouldn't be perfect, but we'd speak some Japanese. It's like a wild thing
Yeah.
about the human brain. And so
Yeah.
that ability to learn a language or to heal a trauma,
Mm,
that's all neuroplasticity, right? Our ability of our brain cells to kind of do new and different things, and then
yeah.
also to, kind of keep replenishing and giving us new brain cells. That's new. We didn't used to think about that. And so
Right.
now I talk about it in my last several books, right? Talking about this idea of our brain could be in grow and repair mode or grow mode.
Hmm.
What can we do to put it in that mode more?
Right.
And so
Right.
that's
So
really
what do we do? Tell us. Give us a little taste here, especially if you could focus on the anxious brain.
for sure.
I know there's all kinds of different ways of looking at our brain.
Oh, this is fun.
And
Why don't we walk through the tenets? Sorry to interrupt you. Why don't
yeah.
we walk through the tenets and
Yeah.
just think about them? Kind
Yes.
of really aligned with anxiety. Everybody
Okay.
just so everybody knows clinically, I do a lot of anxiety treatment
Yeah.
and probably I'm a therapist, but I would say anxiety's coach is a good way to describe me in a lot of
Yes.
ways where
That's
I'm
what you're
really
doing.
yeah, I love hearing about triggers. I really love thinking about anxiety as one of these superpowers, and like any
Mm.
superhero, that archetypal superhero story when they first get the magic wand or they first get the power, and like, oh, they zap the building and like they can't control the wand. I think about
Right.
anxiety a bit like that. It's a bit of a
Yes.
superpower, and when it's out of control, boy, nothing worse, right? Really horrible, as I'm sure everyone listening knows. But when we can control it, right, that your heart
Hmm.
rate is up. This happened to me a
Yeah.
lot actually in the last several years where I've had a bit of like an anxious trigger response. To the
Mm.
point it's kind of uncomfortable for me. I've been in a lot of therapy, and I wouldn't say I feel I'm beyond that. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not something I like that comes out, especially when I don't know what it's about. But I've been in this work long enough that when it happens, it's like almost everything else shuts down because I really want to pay attention to it. So
Yeah.
when it comes to anxiety for self-awareness, I think the first, and it's sort of obvious, but I'm just going to say it, really honoring and paying attention to when you shift from states of calm to states of anxious. Is it
Mm.
times of the day? Is it around certain subjects? For me,
Hmm.
it's, my anxiety lives in some very clear places. And so when it gets
Yeah.
kind of churned up, triggered, activated, whatever word you like, I like to pay attention to that, and I like to have some knowledge about what it is if I can to help me feel more
Hmm.
oriented. That and then the tools, right? We don't know that, we need a deep breath
Hmm.
until we use a little self-awareness and understand, sure,
Yeah.
anxiety always takes away our breath, right? It
Yes.
always takes away our sense of like mastery and control. So self-awareness around anxiety, those are a couple of sort of ideas. Um, I think that moving into the sort of next tenet of thinking about
Yeah.
nutrition and anxiety, there's a scoping review by Laura LaChance and Monique Anchun. Monique, I'm sorry, I'm getting your name wrong. Um, and I think Uma Naidu was an advisor on that paper as well. It's a scoping review of nutritional psychiatry interventions and studies on anxiety. I think it's open source. Yeah, I think the bottom line is there's really only been one study, the EASE GAD study, that was completed by the
Mm.
team I just mentioned. And they found that intensive counseling, in some ways anxiety coaching
Mm.
around nutrition helps, that in clinical
Yeah.
settings, it helps. Most of these studies are looking at promoting a kind of more Mediterranean style diet with,
Right.
trying in some ways getting a little bit more nuanced and detailed than like the, no sugar, no carbs, no whatever, and
Right.
say, okay, Mediterranean style diet means I have my little rhyme for what I recommend people kind of start with this seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. Because if you
Mm.
think about all of those foods, they're reasonably kind of low carbohydrate, maybe not the beans, I add into there rainbow vegetables and fermented foods. And this is how I
Mm,
think as a nutritional psychiatrist that we're thinking in food
right.
categories. So for people with anxiety specifically, not lots of data. There's a correlational study looking at choline. Choline we
Hmm.
find in eggs and tofu, which makes it
Hmm.
one of my favorite nutrients because, if
Mm.
you find people who like eggs and tofu, I think those people are probably great. We're going to get along because, if some people want to argue about eggs and tofu, it's like, next, swipe left, right? Is that what they say
Yeah.
these days?
Yeah.
Keep swiping. So, um, but I would say that for anxiety and nutrition, there are a couple of just quick ideas. One is, emotional eating, quote unquote, or anxious eating, I think is something to really pay
Mm.
attention to and try and up level. I'm the
Yeah.
kind of person that like when I get physical anxiety, when I get my trauma triggered, whatever, like I like to
Yeah.
nosh, I like to nibble, I like to have my bevy with me. It's just how I
Yeah.
am. I
Yeah.
get teased about it sometime. I don't care. You know why? It helps me feel great. So,
Yeah.
but I like making sure though that I'm not snacking on the black and white cookies. My children will tell you that's all I do, but it's not true. Or just the ice cream, which can be a go-to, right? But that
Yeah.
I'm being intentional for myself that it's not later at night because that's not really when I want to be eating. I'm intentional that it's going to be a little more nutrient density.
Hmm.
Um, I'm intentional that yeah, it's going to be mostly water for my bevy, but occasionally I get a little special spindrift or something or
Yeah.
kombucha.
Something with
Um,
flavor.
Something
Yeah.
with a little flavor, maybe a little herbal tea. So,
Hmm.
so again, nutrition for anxiety, I think, is about using comfort foods appropriately.
Yeah.
There's a illustration in Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety of comfort food for carb craving, and it's
Yeah.
about looking at something like I don't know, you want to have a sweet potato or even a regular potato with a little bit of salt and pepper and butter at night.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go
like you
ahead.
just ate a great source of potassium and beta carotene, and that's different than going down for a burger and fries at the
Yeah.
local fast food place.
Yeah.
And so those are a few ideas around nutrition and anxiety. The next tenet is movement. And I'm just going to
Hmm.
say, like, go dancing more, period. More dance
Oh,
parties in your house, go
yeah.
dancing with friends more, go line dancing, take a dancing class. I tell a wonderful story about one of my patients that taught me this because I was just droning on like every doctor. You should exercise more. Haven't thought
Uh,
about exercise? Oh, blah, blah, exercise, exercise. And she came in with a big old smile on her face one day, and I was like, huh,
yeah.
what's going on? And she'd returned. I had no idea about this because I'd never asked, but she'd had a hobby of tango dancing. I'd never known
Ah,
about this. And and I just delighted. This is like a mom in her, I think she was in her late 40s, early 50s back then. And I don't know. It's just the story delighted me. She delighted me. And then there's been a lot of research that's come out that like, oh,
yeah.
yeah, exercise is great, but it's really like the top movement in terms of effect size for increasing mood is dance. And so
Yeah.
I love these uh, daybreaker dance parties or these sober dance parties in the morning. Oh,
Oh,
Gina, sorry, you got me like on a Friday afternoon here. Sorry to be all rambly, but let's just go back. The
no, I am
nutritional
loving
piece
this.
is alcohol, right? So, but we
Oh,
always
okay.
focus on like
Yeah.
alcohol, sugar.
Yeah.
Some of those usually
Yeah.
like those are, and the last one is for
It,
anxiety. Sorry to go back to nutrition. Is just seeing if there are certain things that's kind of rare, but some people like really sensitive to the stimulants in chocolate, or some people are
yeah.
really sensitive to certain foods. I had a patient who ate raw onions the other day, and like her anxiety is up just because she has a really strong reaction to them.
Right.
It's like messes up her
It's
gut and
physical. Yes,
causes a few
exactly.
days. I think the other thing in nutrition is fermented foods. There's so much in nutrition, everybody, and I really try to get into a lot of details about it in Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. In Healing the Modern Brain, we have a nice big chapter on nutrition. We go through a lot of these studies. We go through a few of the kind of toxins in the diet, like acrylamide and fried foods that, I think there's just compelling science if you have anxiety that will
Yeah.
help you think about fewer French fries, but more
Yeah.
oven roasted potatoes. All right. We did nutrition, we did a little bit of movement, sleep and anxiety. My sense with anxiety disorder is and worry is it interrupts sleep and particularly falling asleep and then
Yeah.
falling back asleep. And so I find, people have a lot of people have different approaches, and some of them take some discipline. Not having a clock in the bedroom,
Mm,
so you're setting
I
an
like that.
alarm outside and you're just staying, staying in bed, calm, relaxed, but not looking at that number and worrying. Oh, it's
Right.
another hour. It's another hour. Um, I'm a big proponent of saunas for sleep. That's probably my top tip.
Oh, nice.
Really love a sauna before bed. And then I'm a fan of if you're gonna be up in the middle of the night for an hour, be calm, be useful, i.e.,
Mm. Mm.
stretch,
Yeah.
journal,
Yeah.
engage in it, have a cup of tea, get in the
Yeah.
sauna maybe if you have one, right? Where it's just like, as opposed to this doomsday awful thing, it's just like, spend an hour with yourself, be kind, get back to bed. You'll
I
get
always
tired,
say
pup.
those are the people that say I don't have 10 minutes to meditate or pray during the day.
Yeah.
Well, just lay there in bed and be with it. Yeah,
Yeah, I think those
it's
are good.
okay.
The next connection, a tenet is connection, and
Yes.
connection for anxiety. Let's talk about the way that anxiety and that kind of social anxieties can also interrupt
Yeah.
connection, worrying too much about what people think about us, not looking people in the eye, not engaging with people. It's a tenet
Hmm.
that's coming up, but this happened to
Hmm.
be I was sitting at a basketball game, and I'm sitting there next to a guy. I don't know him. He sits down. I
Yeah.
invited him to sit down next to me, and then we start watching the game. About 5 minutes later, he's like, "So how you been?" I was like, "Oh man, so sorry. Like, how
Yeah.
have you been?" Sure, we were a little
Yeah.
distracted by the game, but just that kind of
Yeah.
engaging with one another is something that, for a lot of us, we kind of, I know it's been a while, but, COVID and kind of the whole social isolation thing, it just kind of, stuck with a lot of people. I heard a lot of
Yes.
patients say, I just didn't get back into socializing. I think with all the polarization we have in our society right now and all the controversy, sometimes it just gets hard to socialize. You don't want to end up at some big political argument. You want to go out on a Friday night and relax. And
Right.
so it just, there are a lot of subtle ways that the hostility of polarization makes connection harder. The next tenet is engagement. And this is where I
Yes.
think people with anxiety get pulled out of the present. I mean, this happens to me
Mm.
so much with my anxiety where I'm grinding on some future thing that's not going to happen, and I'm not really like engaged with the task in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, One of the reasons I love being a therapist is that it kind of trains your brain, because
Mm.
if you float off for 1 second into whatever anxious fan, you're not with your patient, you're not doing your
No.
job. It's a
And they
very,
feel it.
they feel it, you come right back into that room like, oh.
Hmm.
And so it really kind of trains you, like,
Yeah.
stay on target, stay focused
Yeah.
right here in the now. Engagement is just that thing I noticed in my patients and in myself. Like, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't get into
Mm.
those habits of, regularly engaging with your body and movement, regularly engaging with your partners in connection, regularly
Mm.
engaging with yourself in terms of your purposeful work. So, engagement's really kind of, I call it the elusive tenet,
Mm.
right? Because we're all tired, we're all overscheduled. Everybody
Mhm.
sits down with their phone and is like, ah, a few minutes to myself.
Yeah.
And and that's fine, but it's just like that doesn't help us engage. That helps
Right.
us dissociate and isolate. All right, so three quick tenets left. Next is grounding for folks with anxiety.
Grounding.
This is probably my favorite because this is nature, this is free, and this is a place where I find a lot of people learn to relax. I'm doing it right
Mm.
now in the winter at night. I get really
Mhm.
scared in the, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I get a little scared at night in the winter, in the
Yep.
dark, when
Oh,
I'm
the
out in
dark.
nature. And I'm right here on the edge of these really big forests, the
Yeah.
Bravant forest and mountain range, and all of sort of Yellowstone and the Tetons, um, and so you can go, 20, 30 minutes, let's say, cross country skiing out of town, and you're pretty
Mhm.
isolated.
Yeah.
And so I've been really working on going out there and feeling calm. It's like a
Mm.
good exposure for therapy for me as I was kind of getting ready and getting set with this book. Um, Nature calms us down for a number of reasons. Simply seeing green, our nervous
Mm.
system kind of responds and settles down. There's a hospital in Indianapolis, Indiana, Eskenazi Hospital, and the entrance to the ER is this big atrium. It's like a big kind of glassed in hallway, and all around it's all this green. And the CEO, Lisa Harris, when they were designing the hospital at the Eskenazi family, she was really kind of insistent they build this beautiful entrance because studies had shown even just having a little bit of green space for a little bit of time helps settle people down.
Mm.
And same thing with art. And so you'll see these
Yeah.
hospitals now with more art, more greenery, more music. And it's
Nice.
based on a lot of research that, environments, natural environments help settle us down. when you get into the forest, and I go into some of these studies in the book, but if you get into the forest and you have that kind of let down, so there are a number of things going on. There's more ozone in the forest.
Yeah.
There's more these things called phytocides, which trees excrete.
Nice.
There's just that kind of sense, right, pulling you in, more smells,
Yeah.
more sounds. And so grounding in nature is, meaning going out into it, being in it, ideally going out without your device. It's hard because I like to take pictures when I'm out there.
Hmm.
Um, Really, really, I would say, along with fermented foods, I would say probably one of my top recommendations when it comes to
Nature.
anxiety, like you and nature. Yeah, that and a
Mm.
Bernedoodle. I recommend those.
Oh.
One of my patients was teasing me. She doesn't have a Bernedoodle, but she'd gotten a dog, and she's like, "Ah, does all your patients get dogs?" I'm like, the good ones, yeah.
Wow.
Um, so, um, so grounding, being in nature. And I guess it's funny. I hadn't really thought about putting animals and pets in there, but for me, it's a big part of nature is being with animals,
Animals.
interacting with them, observing them. So,
Yep.
pets is in some ways a little bit of grounding. All right. So the last two for anxiety, one is unburdening, and this is if you are anxious a lot and you don't know where it comes from. I,
Yeah.
I, I, I I think that's something to pay attention to. Sometimes there's just simple biological anxiety like hyperthyroidism,
Yeah.
or you have a rare food allergy, or
Yep.
you have just an anxiety disorder. But
Hmm.
sometimes when we're kind of, especially if you're uncomfortable in certain situations or uncomfortable in dependency situations, a lot of people have traumas, not just violent and sexual traumas, but traumas of neglect, developmental
Yeah.
traumas of just, things go wrong. I have this like dear friend in eighth grade. He's like a really rebellious youth, and he called in a bomb threat. I was
Yeah.
just thinking, I remember like that eighth, ninth, 10th grade. It was just like, hard thing to recover. Never did anything like that again. Totally recovered, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know his therapy, but at some point I'm sure he had a couple of sessions about just, kind of unburdening himself, right? That he's
Yeah.
not a rebellious young teen anymore. And so that's maybe a silly example, or maybe not silly, but that's an example of an extreme thing
Yeah.
that happened to somebody that, can stick with them. I find in my practice a lot of times traumas of neglect get really, people are very kind of shameful of them, or very like,
Mm.
very it's hard for people to acknowledge them and hold on to them as real, like a
Mm.
violent trauma. There's a kind of, everyone agrees, right? A trauma
Yes.
where like your mom like ignored you, or a trauma where like your dad was like, he did okay, but he was just not like a very deep guy,
Yeah.
or was really distracted with, I don't know, like his porn addiction, or was really distracted with like, I don't know, another sibling that he just liked better.
Right.
Not like a massive trauma, but boy, can really sit with people
Yeah.
and obscure them from being in the present, right? Prevent them from being here with us. Um, so I'm a big fan of working that through. Somebody who's had a lot of different traumas in my life, and have gotten the honor of sitting with
Mm.
people and hearing about some of the things that, other people don't get to hear about. And
Yeah.
my sense is there's a bit of a focus on kind of trauma and trauma work right now, and I think a little bit
Right.
of a fetishization of trauma work, and almost like, I would say, concerning trends of a lot of that work maybe like revolving too much around psychedelic medicine, or
Yeah.
a lot of, but all to say, unburdening is one of those things that can be very helpful in anxiety, especially if you're seeing your anxiety is triggered in certain situations and there's a big physiological component.
Yeah.
Um, so unburdening. And then the last tenet is purpose. And maybe it's a little grandiose to think that, a book chapter in a self-help book is going to help people find purpose, but I wanted to weigh in because it's one of
Yeah.
my greatest pleasures, getting to sit with people and see their lives unfold and some of their purposefulness, whether it's being a parent, or whether it's their professional life, or both, or whether their
Hmm.
creativity explodes and suddenly they're a farmer. I mean, I've seen purpose just manifest in so many cool ways. And so I wanted people to hear my sense that it's an important thing for us to have an eye to, and that when
Yeah.
we ignore it, or when we feel that we're just being of service to others, or we're just grinding the 9 to 5, that over time really leads to people not feeling a sense of fulfillment with their life. And then again, the research, right? I get into the research
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
hey, don't take it from me. Let's look at the studies. And when you look at what happens when people have a more purposeful existence, they're protected from depression, they're protected
Yeah.
from anxiety. They
Yeah.
have better health outcomes. They have like lower inflammatory markers. I mean, like,
That's
wow.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of cool biology behind that, by the way. Like when we think about, again, we said one lens was neuroplasticity. The other that I ask you to really think about mental health through three new lenses: neuroplasticity, inflammation, and the microbiome. And
Yeah.
inflammatory factors go up when we're more isolated. They go down when we're more connected.
Mm.
Same thing. We spend time in nature. Inflammatory markers tend to go down,
Mhm.
right? When we are isolated in urban environments, they tend to go up. So there's just a lot of cool science behind how these tenets kind of work together. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed, like, oh, you have to do all nine every day.
No, it's not like that. It's beautifully laid out. And I think the beauty of having all 9 is there's people can begin where you're at,
I
start where
hope
you
so,
are.
Gina.
Some people may not have an issue with sleep, but their nutrition needs really some awareness and they can start there and look
That's
at it.
exa- that's
Yeah.
exactly how I hope it works. And then I think as everyone hears and in the stories you'll see, there's like a natural stacking of them.
Yeah.
You can imagine if I'm your mental fitness coach and you tell me, oh, I got
Mhm.
together with a couple of friends and we packed up some healthy salmon jerky and
Mhm.
blueberries and a little
Mhm.
granola and dark chocolate, and we headed out into the forest together for a 2 hour
Yeah.
hike. I mean, like that's like almost all the tenants, isn't
You're
it? I
hitting them
mean,
all. Yeah.
it's like you're moving, you're
Yeah.
connecting, you're engaged, you're having healthy snacks,
Yeah.
you're self-aware that you and your friends need to get out into the woods. I mean, it's really great. And so there's a way that there are a number of activities where again you can stack these tenants. And where I like it is that I think for any time we're adhering to something that we know is good for us, there's it gets called a placebo effect, but I would call it like a better, more accurate is like there's a self-care effect.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that we're adhering to a set of values that we have, that we're walking the talk.
Yeah.
And I think that generally makes us feel very good about ourselves. It's not just the endorphins and endocannabinoids that make you feel good after exercise. It's
Yeah.
also just that psychological thing of like, you said you'd do it, you did
And
it.
yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. There's
Yeah.
so much here. So much here. And
Well, it
I
means so much to me. You like the book. I mean, just in all seriousness, boy, launching
Well,
a
I
book
couldn't
is
believe
always
I didn't
something.
know of it. And so I am very thankful to your publisher. And it sounds like this book launch is going well. You have other books that people can also check out, but I will have a link to this book and a link to your website. Is that where why don't you tell
Yeah,
us where we should find you if we're looking
yeah.
for more?
Well, everybody, first of all, thanks everybody for listening. I'm really easy
Mhm.
to find. My website's drewramseymd.com, and I have a few things for you there. We have some e-courses, including an Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety and a Healing the Modern Brain e-course. I've got a
Mhm.
great team of clinicians licensed in a number of states. Samantha Elkreef, Xiao Hu, who's a great psychedelic psychiatrist. We have a number of clinicians here in Wyoming, Ben Smoke and Margaret Brigham. So,
Mhm.
and then we have a free newsletter, Friday Feels, which comes out every
Mhm.
Friday. It's
Right.
some of our favorite science that comes out during the week and some special offers. Um, I'm on Instagram a lot, so if you're on social and on Instagram, I'd love a follow. I run my own account, so if you
Oh,
DM me, I'll
nice.
see it. And yeah, and I hope folks will check out Healing the Modern Brain. Most importantly, I hope you'll check out the book. And I
Yes.
think this crowd would also like you to beat depression and anxiety. But most importantly, I just hope this conversation inspires you. I think a lot of what Gina and I talked about, helps your mental health and your mental fitness. These aren't revolutionary ideas sometimes. I think some of the science is new and exciting. But I just hope our conversation inspires you that there's a lot that you can do because I think know from my personal experience, sometimes it doesn't feel that way.
Mm.
But engaging in these tenets in my clinical and personal experience allows us to feel more mastery and control over our mental health. And that's my hope for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sure that people have felt inspired. Just because we know something doesn't mean we do it. Sometimes we need that inspiration. And
Oh,
I'm
it's so
hoping
true.
I'm
So
hoping that
that
that's what your book will do also, along with this conversation. So it's such a pleasure to spend time with you, and I appreciate you, Drew. And I hope everybody, the book is available, so go on out and get it. Thanks again, Drew.
Thanks so much, Gina. I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks everybody for listening and have a great day.
Aloha.